The revolution's begun. The time to stand up has come. We are the rocking of the throne. We are the rocking of the throne.
My name is Victor Tiffany, co-founder of Revolt Against Plutocracy, and I'm talking today with YouTuber, Save America Volt Tulsi host, David Spurrier. David, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Victor. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I couldn't resist having you on, given your background. And why don't you explain to people how it is you went from supporting Donald Trump in 2016 and coming around and supporting Tulsi Gabbard in 2020?
Well, I mean, to boil it down, because there are probably 3 or 4 different issues, but the biggest is when Donald Trump ran for president. Number one, he said he wanted to do fewer interventions, try to get along with other countries, and this was a big thing in his campaign because a lot of people in the Republican establishment didn't like that kind of conversation. And I thought it was probably the best thing about Trump that he was serious about getting along with Russia, for instance. And obviously we could take that into a whole video about what's happened since that. But mainly because he's got some of the worst war hawks currently serving in his administration. John Bolton, I mean, just incredible how a lot of folks, I think, were not ready for John Bolton, Mike Pompeo. Obviously, I know his VP, Mike Pence, I think, has way more responsibility and is very busy as a vice president. He's not one of these guys who's behind the scenes. I think he calls a lot of the shots. And also the influence of Jared Kushner, which, of course, is Trump's son-in-law, married to Ivanka. All of those things. And
so what was the moment you realized you might have gotten conned in 2016?
I think when those missiles landed in Syria, I think I was really surprised that he threw out some missiles, meaningless missiles, really, because they missed their target. But I was noticing, too, that the mainstream media, like Brian Williams, they're all like, oh, wow, this is, President Trump. He's really, it seems the only time Trump gets positive media coverage is when he's declaring war or threatening war or actually launching an attack. But, there's evidence, but there's no concrete evidence that Assad actually did, gas his own people. And everybody, all the UN folks were saying, hey, you need to do an investigation here.
Right.
You start bombing. And that was not what I voted for. I voted for somebody who is going to, lay off this stuff and become a little more dovish rather than getting George W. Bush's administration going again, which this is what it appears to be for me right now.
Well, that's after that cruise missile attack is when we started calling him President Hillary Trump.
Well, that's the thing too, because Hillary would have launched that attack without any, I'm sure Trump probably argued for 5 minutes with everybody before they all just said, you don't know what you're doing, because you just, I knew Trump going in was going to be a delegator. I knew, just because he didn't have the background. And but it's scary how much he's just kind of handed it all over. Now that I think back and I've kind of analyzed everything, I think that Trump really didn't think he was going to become president. I think he did this largely for just the Trump brand, to try to, because you run for president, and even if you lose, your name ID, your visibility, and that's Trump. Trump wanted more of that. He already could say, hey, look, I beat all of these primary contenders, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio. I just laid waste to them. And that would have been enough for Trump. But he won it because Hillary was such a bad candidate. And Trump was talking a lot of economic populism, bringing jobs back to the Midwest. I mean, these are other things that I really believed about Trump. I had no reason not to believe he wasn't serious. It's really sad if he made all of these promises and they were just, just platitudes, empty promises. Like he says, hey, I'm not a politician, but yet he pulled off one of the great political stunts in history. So
he did, but he knows the media very well, and I think that
Yeah.
that was his major tool.
That's
So
true.
what brought you around to supporting Tulsi Gabbard? Why her and not, say, Bernie Sanders?
Well, here's the thing. During the last election cycle, I remember seeing people crying on the convention floor, the Democratic convention, and I knew that they had stolen that from Bernie. And I don't know, I guess because of all of the talk about, well, Bernie's just a crazy socialist, and when I was more right-leaning, some of that stuff tends to stay. It tends to stick with you, whether it's true or not. Whether I have a better understanding what Bernie Sanders actually stands for now. When you got the likes of Ann Coulter coming out and saying, hey, I might even work for you if you toughen up your immigration stance a little bit. Because, a lot of what Bernie is talking about is common sense stuff. The difference between Bernie and Tulsi, though, for me personally, is I think Tulsi, by focusing really more so on the anti-war message, the regime change war, and that's kind of her phrase, by the way. If you notice, that phrase has really picked up momentum, because prior to that, nobody was saying regime change war. People were saying, well, useless war or interventions. But I think Tulsi, in that little phrase, and I'm sure somebody probably said it before her and she hammered it home, but then looking at the cost of war, looking at the amount of money we spend, and you're looking at an old Tea Party guy here from back in 2008, and I was out there with Ron Paul's group, Campaign for Liberty, and we were deficit hawks. We were tired of both the military-industrial complex and even, somewhat in the welfare state as well. We were looking at everything and saying, the United States spends too much money, but we weren't afraid to talk about how much the military was wasting. So I think that attracted me to Tulsi. I think because she's a bit younger, she's a really unique candidate because she served in the military. So her perspective of peace is based on her the fact that she's in these conflicts. And so she understands, I think, the nature of war. And rather than coming home and saying, yep, I was in a war, let's do more war, she's saying, I've seen this firsthand. He was just talking to Martha McCallum the other day on Fox News, and she's like, hey, Martha. Martha's trying to school her, and she's coming back and saying, well, look, I've been there. I've seen the cost of war. And I think she's really a unique candidate. Her age, the fact that she's been in politics since the age of 21.
I don't see anyone schooling Tulsi. It's always the other way around.
Well, Jimmy Dore likes to say that when Tulsi sits down with a media person, she's got to teach the media person how to do news. And I just think that's hysterically funny, but it's also spot on as far as making a point.
It's true. So we've made Tulsi our plan B if Bernie, for example, drops out.
Yeah.
For any reason, whether he's forced to, or he gets sick, or whatever. So she becomes Plan B. At that point, we're convinced most of Bernie's supporters are going to go over to Tulsi for all the reasons she supported him. She's also, her and Mike Gravel are the only two who have come out in opposition to this totalitarian fascist assault on our First Amendment with the arrest of Julian Assange.
Yes,
I frequently tweet Bernie Sanders, letting him know he's not getting any of my money until he comes out and denounces that arrest.
Yeah.
And she is getting my money. But as an organization, we had to support the candidate that our subscribers want. We're not running this as a dictatorship. We ran a vote some time ago, and 69% of the people that subscribe to our newsletter wanted to do Bernie or bust over again. So we had to figure out, before we actually launched this Bernie or bust strategy 2 Saturdays ago, we had to figure out how to take this exclusive strategy. Or bust means screw you. I'm voting third party. I'm not with you. That's what or bust means. Very exclusive. So we had to figure out how to make it inclusive of a candidate like Tulsi Gabbard, who's more progressive on foreign policy, as you indicated, than Bernie Sanders. He's also against the Cold War. I used to be a nuclear freeze activist.
Wow.
For me, the Cold War and the nuclear arms race was way more terrifying on the whole than anything that these Islamic terrorists have even thought of so far.
Right.
Because of the life-ending, human life-ending nature of a major nuclear exchange. It's just far more terrifying. And so to have Tulsi come out and explicitly oppose a new Cold War with Russia and another nuclear arms race with Russia and China is a big feather in her cap from my perspective. So we had to figure out a way. How do you include her in an exclusive strategy? And the way to do that is, the way we came up with was to make her Plan B. Now, Plan B has 2 components. If Bernie drops out, it's going to be Tulsi or trash the Democratic Party. We think she'll get enough support from Bernie supporters. But if he doesn't drop out and he doesn't get the nomination, if he gets the nomination, then there is no Plan B. I suspect he'll appoint her as Secretary of State, which is what I think she's running for, actually. But if he's not the nominee, then we will go with compelling the nominee, whoever it is, Joe Biden, who we don't think will go along with this because he gets his marching orders from transnational bankers, not from grassroots movements.
Right.
So we don't think he'll ever make Tulsi his vice president choice.
No. And
put her on the ticket. But maybe he'll drop out, or maybe he'll drop dead, or won't be the nominee for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And whoever it is will need to support. Well, I'm sorry, we'll need to choose Tulsi as the vice presidential candidate if he or she wants our support, wants to win the election. So it's 2 components. If Bernie drops out, or if Bernie doesn't get the nomination, we want her to be either the nominee in the case of the former and vice presidential nominee in the case of the latter. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a very pragmatic plan. I'm not, kind of like Tulsi Gabbard often says, one of her favorite things that she says to supporters is, I'm not naive to the challenge that lies before us. And I think she realizes her campaign is a bit of an uphill battle. And I do believe that, I would support a Bernie nomination, obviously, if Bernie Sanders was to get, the party's nomination. I will still pay attention to the campaign, though, and make sure that he's, that the party doesn't co-opt or try to mess with his message where, especially the stuff on economic populism, because I think that's where he is the strongest. The real proposals, the real ideas that he's bringing forward, so long as those things actually see the light of day, then I'll definitely be voting for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I'd like to give him a little advice actually on his haircut. Seriously, I would like to have him just drop this whole attempt at a comb over and take the rest of his hair and make it like, just a normal bald man's,
Yeah, well, Victor, you
bald on top, but short around the sides, like a lot of bald men have. I just don't know why he's keeping it so shaggy when he's running for president of the United States. He should look as neat and trim and presidential as he possibly could. I know that sounds stupid and superficial, but there are people who vote that way, and I think a decent shorter haircut on his part would benefit him over whatever the hell that is on top of Trump's head.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw that New York Times, or actually, no, I think it was the Washington Post. They did an article on Bernie probably about a month ago now, where they were comparing Bernie to Trump. And they were basically saying, well, you got two crazy old white guys with crazy hair, right? They threw that in there. They wanted to make sure that they got their little dig in, that you're going to replace one guy with.
Uh-oh, you're froze up just now. Sometimes this comes back.
Or tugging on his socks or something, and really observant of the Washington Post, who really can't get any of the other important facts straight, but they can tell us about what Bernie Sanders is doing, waiting to take the stage during one of his campaign stops. So I would agree with you as far as presentation. You know, if he does become the nominee, he can't look like the the angry college professor from the 1970s. It's not a look that's presidential, as you mentioned. But I talk a lot in my videos about presentation, about the perception of somebody from this political perspective, and what those in flyover country think, and what those who maybe are kind of a little right of center think, and how you can appeal to those voters, because Tulsi Gabbard did it for me. And that might be some of the appeal and charm of Tulsi, is that she's a very young, attractive woman. Let's just be honest. And but she's also.
I'll tell you what appeals to me about her, real quick, if I can interrupt you.
Sure.
Pick it up. She's unflappable. Even Bernie, sometimes when someone will try to compare his democratic socialism to Marx's totalitarian Soviet kind of communism, right, he'll roll his eyes or something. But you never see Tulsi do that.
No.
She's so unflappable. No matter what they're saying about her, she'll just sit there and look, and then she'll go on and explain to them, as you said earlier, how to do their job. She's just totally unflappable, and that's a very presidential characteristic.
Absolutely. And like I said before, Tulsi has this ability to. Well, I haven't said this before, but anyway, Tulsi has this ability to connect with people in a way that I think is rare in politics. It's very rare. She's got this video, and I'm sure you've seen it, with this woman from Afghanistan who's a U.S. citizen, and she grabs the microphone and she's very passionate about, and she gets to that question of, what are you going to do against your own party? How are you going to fight your own party? And the woman's in tears because she's seen the cost of war in her former homeland. And Tulsi comes over, rather than just being like all distant, she comes over, gives this woman a hug, holds her for like 30 seconds as the woman's crying, and then answers the question. And not only that, but she has this look of like righteous indignation, as if to say, this shouldn't be happening. And she's not, this is not a script. This is not political consulting. In fact, this is the exact opposite. And when you see moments like that, you're like, this is the candidate. I mean, this is the person that cares about you and me and everybody else, and nobody's seeing it. That's why I get frustrated. I do my channel, and I'm like, nobody's seeing this but me.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, we were talking before we went on live here about the growth of your channel. It's phenomenal. We've had our channel up for a couple years now and have 300 and some subscribers. Talk about the growth of your subscribers in the last couple of weeks.
Well, yeah, it's actually been absolutely just crazy and really surprising. I mean, I started the channel with this idea that I was going to take on neocons and neo-libs. And then I said to myself, well, I'm really into Tulsi Gabbard right now. Why don't we just do it about Tulsi? So I got the name. I just said, I'm just doing it. Save America, vote Tulsi Gabbard. I was hoping maybe I could get to 1,000 subscribers so I could monetize. And I'm at 2880 or almost 2,900 subscribers. last time I looked. And I'm not even, early on, I'm like, please subscribe, please subscribe. Now I'm just like, this is crazy. And so there's definitely I guess, a hunger for different perspectives. And I think I'm kind of a weirdo because I come in from this center-right past. And it's kind of like Joe Rogan. That's why a lot of people are intrigued by these podcasts with Joe Rogan, because Joe is, I'm not sure where Joe is politically, but I think he's more of just a generic blank slate observer. And so he looks at everything, and when he's not political, but he understands politics to some degree, and he understands issues. And I think I bring a little bit of that perspective. Like, I'm not into identity politics. I'm just not into it. There's this great candidate running against John Cornyn in Texas, and she's a lovely woman. She has a great opportunity down there.
Selma Hernandez.
There you go. I wasn't going to remember her name, so that's good. But she's on Jimmy Dore a couple weeks ago talking about intersectionality. And I'm thinking, lady, you're in Texas, all right? I'm not sure if intersectionality is going to sell in Texas. What you need to do is just tell people that you're for Medicare for all. Tell people you're for free public college education. Go through the list of issues. Stick to them. You'll appeal to every type of people without kind of pandering to this old liberal left tribalism, bean counting mentality. Just drives me crazy. And I may be a bit too strident on that opinion, but I see a lot of wasted time. And I see, hey, we've got big issues. I understand there's all kinds of systemic discrimination and historical discrimination, and I get that. But we've got a country to save, and you've got to convince people from all sides of the political spectrum that your ideas will work, and you don't have a lot of time to waste.
Yeah, intersectionality is an interesting I don't want to say phenomenon, but an interesting thing to analyze and even run on. But it's one of those words that you immediately turn people off because they don't know the meaning of it.
Here you go.
And Bernie's very good at this. He does exactly what you're describing. He just lays out this populist agenda in common, ordinary language that everyone can understand. Do you have any other questions about our approach in terms of making Tulsi? Using Tulsi or trash the Democratic Party. Let me just ask you this: if it's not Bernie and it's not Tulsi, are you going to vote blue, or are you going to find another candidate out there?
No, I might vote green, not blue. I don't know, and that's crazy for me to say that, but it depends on what happens. I know there are a few people over on Twitter who follow me who have unfortunately said that if Tulsi's not the nominee, and I'm assuming that would apply to Bernie as well, they might go back to Trump, because they're looking at Biden as the candidate of the month here, and the media investing. Let's be honest, the media, when they get a hold of somebody and they start talking nonstop, it's hard to compete with that kind of publicity, and it's free. And Biden is now getting it around the clock. He was on The View yesterday, or his wife was on The View. He's been on The View. All of these, and I'm not just saying The View is a great source, but it's every single day now. He got this huge endorsement from, the Firefighters Union. So a lot of us are looking at this going, okay, it's already rigged. I've already started doing videos, and I'm saying to the subscribers, you guys need to be telling these true progressives out there, because I don't consider myself one. People with larger platforms. Jimmy Dore does this all the time, and there are other folks that do it a little bit. But rather than talking about how bad Joe Biden is every day, you need to focus on the DNC. And if they're rigging this, and if the media needs to be held accountable, which obviously they do all the time. But again, this goes to my point about time running out and getting to the point and not wasting time on things like, just this tribal, like picking apart Captain Obvious things like Biden is a corporate shill. We know this. We know he's a corporate shill. Talk about Tulsi. Talk about Bernie. Build these people up. Every time they do an event, talk about what Bernie had to say. You mentioned Bernie. Bernie, you know where Bernie killed it? Was at the Fox News town hall. Absolutely one of the best political events I've seen ever.
Yeah, they weren't expecting to have so many of their audience raise their hands and say, "Yeah, I'd like to have Medicare for all, not this corporate insurance that we have now."
Well, Medicare for all is a pay raise,
right?
It's a pay raise. People don't realize that because my wife, I think, is spending, I want to say about $220 or something like that every pay period for health insurance for our family. So that would be a month over about $450 extra in the paycheck if we could do Medicare for all. And obviously you might have to pay more taxes here or there. I don't know all the details on how, if your taxes are going to go up or not, but I'm thinking if everybody's in the pool, just like any other insurance type situation, it would be better, for individuals and for families at that point. But, he just did a great job at that town hall. And as you said, he explained it in clear, ordinary. I love that thing he did at the end where he asked the audience the questions and the audience responded. And the look on Brett Baer's face was awesome. He just didn't know. He's the neocon's neocon. He didn't know what to do with that. He's trying to, all right, Bernie, thanks a lot. Give me the microphone. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, it was good. I like that. And I really look forward to the time when Tulsi's on there because she also has that ability to cross over and connect with conservatives, especially people like yourself who supported Trump because of his campaign promises to wind down, stop the regime change wars and wind, get out of the Middle East, get out of these wars after, obviously after ISIS was defeated. He did run on bombing the shit out of them. So
I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah. So he didn't run as a dove exactly, but she's someone who could reach out for to people on the right like that. Maybe even get them to register as Democrats so that in the primaries they can vote for her, like a lot of people are for Bernie.
That's what I did. So, and it feels kind of weird being a Democrat. It's the first time ever, but here in Florida, where I live, you have to do it. No open primary, but
you said it might be a little strange for you to end up voting green. It doesn't strike me as strange. My son's a libertarian, and last time around he voted for Jill Stein because Gary Johnson was just such a schmuck. His what's Aleppo question in that program on MSNBC was enough to make my son just go, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He just wasn't going to vote for somebody that unqualified.
Yeah.
And he voted for Jill Stein last time around as a libertarian.
Yeah. And look, Jill Stein, in hindsight, was the best candidate in the race last time around. And let's just be honest about it. I know it's funny. I post stuff about Jill Stein on Twitter, and everybody says, well, we got another one here working for the Russian government. And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me, right? You have.
Yeah, I've gotten a few accusations of being a Russian bot.
Yeah.
As I promote the Bernie or Bust Pledge, there are burners who obviously watch MSNBC. And they totally, I don't even want to call it brainwash, because when you wash, it takes out the garbage. Instead, garbage has been dumped into their minds from the likes of Rachel Maddow, and now anybody who's not touting the any blue will do bullshit is suddenly a Russian bot. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, no, I won't go back to Trump, and I will not vote for a corporate Democrat, because it's like I tell people, you're basically voting for a nicer version of Trump, for a version of Trump who can cozy up directly with all of these entities. Keep in mind, Bill Clinton was the guy who got the crime bill through, who did all of these things that a lot of Republicans could have only dreamed of doing. Okay, because he was doing it as,
including NAFTA.
Yeah, he was doing it as this new Democrat, Well, all Joe Biden has to do is take over for Trump, say, look, I'm not Trump, but I'll keep all this stuff going. I'll keep all the low taxes for the corporations. I'll keep that all going. He'll just keep. Why would Joe Biden be the guy to reform government? Why would he?
He's absolutely not. And it's even worse than you're getting to, because there hasn't. We're accumulating now 60 articles that are critical of Biden, including just today his admission from a while back, but we just added this article today where he admits to being a gaffe master. And that's actually a hashtag on Twitter, gaffe master, referring to him, and it's usually used by supporters of Trump. But
yes,
it's worse than you're saying, because, and one of the reasons we made the argument in 2016, we stand by this, despite all the gaffes and crazy shit that comes out of Trump's mouth and Twitter account.
Right.
We still argue that Hillary Clinton would have been more dangerous than Trump. And most people don't understand this because they don't understand what was being done, what was being attempted through this Trans-Pacific Partnership. This was a major corporate coup, not a coup d'etat. They already owned the state, right? They had Obama, they had the Supreme Court, they had the Senate, they had the House.
Right.
What they didn't have was shaping of the law to suit their interests. And the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have replaced what little bit remains of democratic self-government with corporate self-government. It would have fundamentally transformed the United States, and fundamental transformation is Obama's term, 5 days before he was elected. Who knew he was talking about what he was talking about at the time? It certainly wasn't talking about Obamacare. He was talking about this Trans-Pacific Partnership, which, as Biden put it,
same thing. Freudian slip of
tongue. As Biden put it in 2016 or 2015, it would be a new world order, and he's absolutely right about that. It would have been a new world order, and it's a one that displaces anything to do with national self-determination, national sovereignty, or democratic self-determination. All those would have been obsolete if the TPP had gone through. And that's what's scary about Biden, is that he's going to go back to this. You talk about corporate government. It's in spades. I mean, as bad as Trump is, and as bad as the Supreme Court nominees are, at least they're not overthrowing the government with this blanket of corporate rules and regulations that they themselves largely introduced during secret negotiations.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it's funny because you mentioned some real hot button issues in there for conservatives. Conservatives, at least the ones that I have known the last few years, they're really concerned about globalism. Really concerned about. They understand what that means to United States sovereignty. It's funny how they don't connect the dots though with big business. They just think there's it's like George Soros only, you know what I mean, controlling everything. Whereas say the Bernie supporters and the people that are a little bit more awake understand that it's not just a guy like Soros or the Koch brothers. It has to do with really business across working really in tandem with government, because a lot of people just trust big business because they think, oh, well, it's the free market, it's capitalism, that's good. But yet those people are now basically dictating what the government should do on their behalf. And us, we're sitting here going, well, we didn't vote for this stuff. And it all comes down to the fact that you have these elections now, which Biden, I think, raked in 800,000 or something like that from I want to say Comcast, but it was probably a different donor. I guess it doesn't matter. But in one day, Joe Biden just brought in $800,000 to his campaign. And he was in a little town hall setting where he's talking about, hey, they give me a little bit of money. And, he said something like it's corrosive, but he didn't apologize for it. He just went on to say, this is how the game is played. He didn't say that, but he was alluding to the fact that, if you come to my office and you say, hey, Joe, President Biden, I need something. he said, I'm going to listen to you. And where are you and I in that equation? Where are our interests are no longer being represented?
At $20 donations or $25 donations were certainly not heard. That's for sure. One thing I've noticed, MSNBC has been very careful about when they're showing his rallies that they just focus on the stage and they don't show this half-filled gymnasium. Just like 4 years ago.
Does that remind you of anybody? Does that remind you?
Just like 4 years ago, Clinton couldn't fill a gymnasium until the very, very end when she's finally, in the final weeks, started having large audiences. Meanwhile, Bernie's filling stadiums and Trump's filling stadiums. There's no question, based on that alone,
right,
that if they don't put Bernie up or someone who can fill a stadium like Bernie, they're not going to defeat Trump. No. Biden will not defeat Trump. And we cover this in our book, Bernie or Bust. But 4 years ago, Hillary lost, as you said earlier in this conversation, because she was such a bad candidate. She would have lost without Bernie or Bust, is what I'm saying.
Agreed.
But this time around, we are fully planning and intending to claim full responsibility for the defeat of Joe Biden if he's the nominee, and in all likelihood, Tulsi's not his running mate. It's going to be hard for us, as bad as he is. The difficult thing about Tulsi as plan B is if for some reason maybe we get through to his wife and his wife convinces him he had better choose Tulsi if he wants to gain the support of these Bernie or Busters. The hard part will be to convince the people from 4 years ago to support someone like Joe Biden, as opposed with a running mate like Tulsi, based on the fact that no third party candidate is going to win, period. The media won't let that happen.
Right.
And two, having Tulsi Gabbard one aneurysm away from being president of the United States is way better than having Mike Pence one stupid mistake away from being the president. It's just a much better scenario. Not that Biden's better than Trump, but that Tulsi's so much better than Pence in that position. It's worth actually supporting, or would be worth supporting, barely this time around. Again, that's going to be a hard sale for us to make.
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario, and I would just add my 2 cents to that. Based on what I've seen from Tulsi Gabbard, and when she resigned, from the DNC, and she was citing, Hillary Clinton's war hawkishness and just being very blunt and saying, hey, I could not continue to be in that role. Based on, I think, Tulsi's heart, her servant's heart, the soldier heart thing, does she want to serve her country? Absolutely. But does she want to serve the war machine? I don't know. I think
she'd join for two reasons. One, she's a member of the Council for Foreign Relations. That's a hawkish organization.
Yeah.
And she's explained that she's in there so that, just same reason she would go out and talk to someone like Assad. You have to talk to people you disagree with if you're ever going to get them maybe to come over to your side, to get them to negotiate, get them to change their mind. You have to talk to them. Right? So I think she'd prefer to be talking to someone like Biden from the inside rather than from her position in the House. It's just my thought. And the other reason I think she might join is, remember, she went into Trump Tower when Trump was president-elect and had a conversation with him. So I think she would sign on and be his vice presidential pick, especially if it came from a grassroots movement demanding that she do that.
Yeah, see, that would defy a lot of conventional wisdom. That would be very similar to when John McCain chose Sarah Palin to be, and I'm talking demographics, I'm also talking belief system. Although the belief systems are different, there's a lot of
I hope from each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of parity from, okay, I will take this young congresswoman, who, Palin, I would say Palin was probably even more obscure, though, than Tulsi Gabbard. This governor from Alaska nobody knew. But I would say Gabbard, being that she's on the campaign trail and that she's constantly, in the news, not in a positive sense, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around a Biden Gabbard ticket. If it happened, I'd have to consider it because it's Tulsi, obviously, and you would hope that the one aneurysm you speak of would be sooner than later. I hate to be, that kind of a person here, but
we are.
Either
He's
that,
had 2 aneurysms in the past, by the way.
either that or Joe says, you know what, 4 years is enough. We've got this beautiful, young, talented, and he might add clean, since some of his gaffe rhetoric, clean, neat, whatever what he said about Obama, he might want to say that about Tulsi. If that were the case, then yeah, I'd consider it. But I honestly, between you and I think it's either going to be Kamala Harris or Cory Booker.
No, I agree, and we're absolutely going to be opposed to that. But this is going back to that pragmatism that you referenced earlier. This is very much about wanting to defeat Trump,
right,
and doing so in a way that allows the establishment to pull us in, not by saying, "Oh, we'll make her Secretary of State," and then reneging, or signing a pledge to do Green New Deal and then reneging. But rather having her on the ticket. They can't walk away from that. They have her on the ticket. She's in the line of succession, and that's where she's got to be if they want our support. So it's a high demand. It's not as high a demand as Bernie the nominee. It's not that demanding, but it's still up there. It's a high demand that we're making, and I think it's also practical on our part.
Yeah, look, if if you guys can pull that off, I would, that would be a political coup, so to speak, because really everything that's happened so far in this election cycle, and of course it's very early, but progressives' heads are exploding all over the internet with Biden out there every day saying the things he's saying. And then Bernie, you got to admit, Bernie having to be cordial about Biden, even though it's typical of politicians, especially Bernie and Joe, are kind of the same age. So they've known each other for a long time, and Bernie has said some kind things with regard to Biden. At one event, he said something like, "Well, if it's either me, a him, a me, hey, and he was kind of making a reference to either one of us would be great. And again, the heads are exploding. I think it was more just being cordial and conciliatory, or having some decorum.
I'm not so sure. He said the same sort of bullshit about Hillary Clinton, and it's something we didn't buy back then, and we don't buy it about Joe Biden now.
Yeah, and
like we said, if it's Biden Harris, screw them. We'll be voting third party.
Yeah. So who would you vote for third party? Would you go Green?
Probably. They're the closest to Bernie, at least domestically, and they're as progressive as Tulsi is foreign policy, maybe even a little more so. So Jill probably Green, but we'll look at the platforms of the Socialist Party. We'll look at the platform of the Green Party, and we'll make that decision probably after the DNC, once we see what happens there.
See, my thing is, and you're probably right. I mean, I always get a little bit idealistic about a third party, but it seems that you would need a lot of time for a third party to marinate and get into the consciousness of people. And coming out of nowhere as a third party candidate has not worked out very well. Although I think the Libertarian Party had a couple of opportunities to do some damage, and they just chose the worst guy to communicate their message. I think Jill Stein, I don't know if is she coming back again, do you know, to run, or is she done?
I don't know, but I do want to reply to your statement. You're absolutely right. We don't see third party as a way to win the presidency. Mm-hmm. We see third party as a leverage mechanism. We see them as what we need to do without doing something we would oppose, like voting for Trump directly. But it gives us the ability to vote our conscience and undermine the Democratic Party nominee. So it's a leverage mechanism whether it's Green or Socialist Party. It's a leverage mechanism that we use to, we hate to say this, but essentially get Trump reelected. But
Yeah.
that's not our objective. Our objective is to defeat the neoliberal Democrats. Our Bernie or bust, our leverage strategy is a war on neoliberal Democrats.
Yeah.
From Clinton forward.
Well, I can't disagree with it. You know, I voted for Donald Trump the last time around, and I probably wouldn't be doing.
Oh, you just paused out on us again. I assume you'll come back here soon enough.
Rhetoric is obviously hot 24/7, and you know, you can brand him as a racist and a bigot and all this stuff. Do I think that stuff is true? Yeah, it might be, but the bottom line is, if he was really delivering for
Paused out there for a second, so I'm not sure if you're talking about Biden or Trump.
That's funny because they're interchangeable, right? No, I was just saying that Trump, you know, he's just such a mess of a human being, but I knew that's what I was getting when I was voting for that. But I thought to myself, okay, he's going to delegate. He'll delegate. He'll do what he did in his business and so forth, and hopefully the country won't go bankrupt several times. But you know what I'm saying. And his platform looked reasonable. It looked as though if he had followed through, it was the most populism we've seen since probably Ross Perot. You know, and I was thinking to myself, at least somebody who had an actual shot at winning the White House. And I really thought he wasn't going to be co-opted, but he's been completely co-opted. So that's why I can't go back. I'm not going to go back. So I would rather do what you're doing and feel good about myself at the end of the day and say, okay, I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't vote for Biden or the corporate Democrat. I voted third party. And now, we have to regroup. But I'll tell you what, I don't know how much longer the country can keep doing what we're doing. It's the definition of insanity, saying we did this in 2016. A lot of people did defect to Jill Stein, and, she got blamed for a lot of things like electing Trump supposedly and the Russians and all this. There's a real lack of reality in politics right now. And I don't know what fixes that. I don't know what people really are concerned about. Are they just concerned about waking up in the morning and liking the guy who's in the Oval Office, or are they concerned about their families, their paychecks, their life, their health care? I mean, what is it that people want now?
Well, our concern, and we're making this pretty clear on our website under the Green Revolution tab, and also a recent publication by Revolt Against Plutocracy co-founder Patrick Walker, that it's going to be a candidate like Bernie or Tulsi who gets the Green New Deal going. This is about human survival. We are on the verge of a collapse that's deeper than climate change or climate disruption. We're losing, and it's not because the temperatures have gone up 1.5 or 1.6 degrees centigrade, but we're losing the insect population at a very high clip. And if we lose flying insects, we're gone as a species, at least holding 10 billion people or something, 7 billion people, whatever it's at. We'll be down to 7 million people if the insects are gone, because people are going to have to hand pollinate or eat crops that have nothing to do with pollination by insects. So we're on a major crisis of potential human extinction. And that's what's at stake. We understand it. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from last year made it very clear. We're running out of time. We've got 12 years, not to get on this, but 12 years to get this thing turned around, to get the carbon emissions cut in half in 10, 12 years. And it's just not going to happen unless you have someone like Bernie Sanders, which makes arguments against Bernie or bust this time around arguments for human extinction. And we're going to drive that home to any one of these neoliberal assholes in the media who argues that climate or Bernie or bust is somehow selfish or self-centered, the kind of privileged argument that they were making 4 years ago, because we've dropped our priorities of a political revolution to focus on the necessary transformations in the energy sector to bring about a green revolution, a necessary green revolution.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a much better position. I don't think we're going to get the criticism, because we can turn that right around and say, you are arguing for human extinction. How can you argue for human extinction? Joe Biden, you're going to get extinction. Even if he's talking, this and that about climate policy. If you look at what he's saying we're going to go back to Obama's policy of all the above approaches to energy, which is the wrong way to go. That's the path toward human extinction. We need the Green New Deal. He's not going to run on the Green New Deal, and we're attempting to bury him on his climate or his energy policy. So it's just too insufficient. And you go toward Biden and you're going toward extinction. Same, by the way, with Trump. If 2020 is another choice between extinction A and extinction B, you know what we're going to get out of that.
Yeah.
Extinction.
Right.
So this time, Bernie or bust, folks, are the adults in the room. And I would include you, because obviously Tulsi supports hard-hitting climate preservation strategies as well. So
I'm fine. I'm a little, my point of view is I'm a little skeptical on if we can really fix it. That's the thing I'm skeptical about. I'm not skeptical about the fact that the temperatures are going. I mean, it's common sense and it's science. And I'm just wondering, and Tulsi makes this point, by the way, when she talks about her Off Fossil Fuels Act and the whole climate change issue. She says, hey, if you don't have good relationships with other countries around the world, we're just as screwed as we were before, because they're not going to participate in helping us fix this problem. I mean, China right now, I believe they're building coal plants like, McDonald's here in the United States. And if we can't cooperate with other countries and we're constantly doing regime change and worrying about who's doing what to whom in these countries, rather than saying to these countries, hey, the clock is ticking. We don't have a lot of time left. We'd like you to get on board with serious climate change efforts, and this is what we're doing. We'd like you to sign on with us. Lift the sanctions, whatever you need to do for that country to get them on board. Help them figure out how to pay for it, whatever it costs them to do it, and then all move forward together as one planet. Because if you're not doing that, the United States just shuts down carbon. That isn't going to be enough.
No, you're absolutely right. And what you're describing is an entirely new paradigm for national security in a totally post, how do I want to say this without making it sound like, military conflict is behind us. But it's not. The security is more than just about national security, more than just military security. It's about environmental security.
Right.
So it's, in that sense, a post national security paradigm of a world security that you're describing that goes beyond militarism and starts discussing green approach, green energies, and so forth. I would just add real quick that the Green New Deal does include green technology transfers, not sales, transfers. So there's an awful lot of that in that. David, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate your time, and good luck with your YouTube channel.
Thank you, Victor, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, welcome.
Revolt Against Plutocracy won't just be covering the news about the necessary revolution in the United States. Sometimes we'll be making the news. If you want to stay on top of the revolutionary actions and strategies of grassroots, genuine progressives, and our allies, please subscribe to our YouTube channel today.